Hi, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Good morning actually, and I'm now waiting for my dear wife to bathe. We're actually running late because we've just been sitting here, which we do every Friday, and talking over her lesson which she is to give to two groups of children. One at 1 o'clock, which she talks to little kids around the I guess 6 or 7 maybe, and she talks to them, and then she goes up to a school that's a few hundred yards up the road, and she talks to I think 11 to maybe 13-year-olds. So they're a bigger challenge because they actually get to talk back. and she makes that mistake that I guess we all make by not being prepared enough. And I learned a lot from my work as a musician about this, because as a musician, as a singer especially, I worked mainly. I did some jazz. I played the trombone. I had some small groups. I played clubs in London, and I worked for 7 years in one particular band, 7 years on the road, and we did top 40. So all the time you have the top 40 is changing, and there will be new songs to learn all the time. Now, new songs, we'd have one rehearsal in which we'd be able to, I don't know, we'd be able to hold up the words, and then when we performed that at night or on the gig, I would be expected to be able to sing that song, know it, without the words. Well, actually I used to cheat quite a lot. I had very good eyesight in those days, so if there was a lot of words, I hadn't put enough work in, and there's the key. If I hadn't put enough work in on it, I might not know it. So I would have one of those foolscap sheets like this big, and I would print the words in large letters in a felt tip pen, and I'd be able to read it from the floor. It wouldn't take long, and I would have memorized the song. So I'm very much aware now of the need for preparation. You need to get to that point where you don't have to think about what to say. And the only way that you can do that is by repetition. Unless you are a brilliant, I don't know, unless you have a photographic memory and you can just do that. Not too many of us are that way. The rest of us have to listen to something over and over and over. Now what Beth does is she thinks that if she hands me the pieces of paper that have what she is supposed to teach, because it's not just her going along and talking as she wants. She has to remember what there's a syllabus that she has to go through. So it will say purpose and objectives and examples and so on. And in those different categories, she would be expected to deal with a certain subject, a certain aspect of the subject. So what does she do? She thinks that if she just goes over it on the last minute, then she's going to be just fine. And of course she's not, because you need to understand something very thoroughly for yourself if you're going to teach it to someone else. There is a saying, of course, you teach what you most need to learn. And that is something that happens every Friday when we go through it. It's actually, I make it a little before 11 o'clock now, and for an hour before this, before she trotted off to go and bathe, we talked about what she was supposed to be covering. Now this is a good it's a good lesson. There's a good lesson to be learned which you can use in everyday life on this very subject. The saying, when you're teaching somebody something, you need to tell them, then you need to tell them that you've told them, and so on. Because the average person needs to be told something, they need to read something, need to digest something like 8 times at least before they've really got it. So if you're going to teach somebody something, you have to be able to put forward the lesson that's going to be learned. This is what we're going to do, and this is an example of it being done. So you want to teach someone the importance of family, then what you have to ask yourself, well, why is a family important? And that's one of the lessons that we've been doing today with Beth. A family is the basic foundation of our beginning lives. We all have a mother and a father, even if that may change later due to divorce or separation. And let's say that in a normal family, certainly here in the Philippines, there will be brothers and sisters. Now, that is like a microcosm of the world for us. In fact, that is our world, isn't it? Now, what do we gain from having brothers and sisters? Well, if you're a guy, if you're a brother and you have sisters, you're going to learn your basic lessons on what women are about. Of course, as a guy, you'll never ever understand them, but you might gain a working knowledge. I'm being facetious. So that's where you learn to interact with women. And if you're a sister and you've got brothers, that's where you'll learn to interact with men. What normally happens is that for either gender, you have the extended family, which is usually friends. So if you're a girl and you've got brothers, those brothers will have friends, and those friends will come to the house, and that will be a form of extended family for you. And you'll learn to interact with members of the opposite sex. So either way works very well. But the act of learning has to be done with examples which will be real to you. So if you're trying to teach somebody something, you need to memorize enough of that subject that you'll be able to pull up examples, little anecdotes of what you've learned. I know that when I was trying to learn a song, this was very important. Once I would get up to sing a song to the audience in the band that I was, the particular band was a 13-piece band, so a big band, and I would have to be able to sing that song under quite difficult conditions, because there would be people that were interacting with me in some way or another, and I would not be able to think about the song in order to say it, sing it. I would have to know it. One of the ways that I did this was usually I would be doing 2 songs in the new requirement. So I would practice over and over and over song A, and then when I thought that I had it down, I would put that away for a moment and I would practice song B. Now, what I found when I was working and learning songs was that there gets a point where, if you think of it as being like a pond, right? So in the pond, as you work, here's the surface of the pond. As you work on that surface, you get to know, because the song never sinks out of sight, so you always know it. So you have the apparency that you've learned that song. That's not true. If you stop singing that song, if you stop learning that phrase, if you stop learning that language, that math, that geography, that history, it sinks out of sight. Now when you come to retrieve it, depending on how well you've learned it, you'll be able to easily dip into the pond and pull it back up to the surface. The test of whether you have really learned it is to study something else. So you've got song A, you learn it, and then you get to the point where you can sing it. Right? Okay. Or you get to the point where you can recite it, or your speech, you know it, or you can say it. Any of those examples. And it now sinks below the surface. Now you look at something else. So if it's a song, you look at another song. You start singing the other song, and now the other song, song 2, song B, is on the surface. And so now you revert back and see how your memory is, your retrieval is on song A, or speech A. Now you've got to dip below the surface to pull it up. So your recall is dependent on how well you've actually worked on it. Now, by alternating the two, you will let the thing dip below, and then you look at the other, and that one comes up and you learn it and you dip below, then you go back to the first one, and you may need your help. You may need to look at the piece of the written material in order to do number 1 again. So you do it until it's floating happily on the surface again. Now you go back to song or piece B and you look at that. Well, now it's not so easy to retrieve that. So you now have to work, and you may need your reminder, which is your written material. So you look at it, and as you look at one, and then the other, and then the other, and then the other, gradually you will learn what you need to know. Then you put both of them away, and you do something totally different, and then you come back. Now you've had time to place it into your filing system, which depends on you having done your work, and then your ability to retrieve what has been learned. Learning is repetition. When I was working on trombone, I would be working from what they call a tutor, which is a book which has graded exercises which get more and more and more and more and more difficult as they get towards the end of the book. And you play the exercises, and they're all numbered. You go and you have an exercise on page 1, then you go to page 2, and then gradually your ability starts to increase. Now, for my professor that I would have to go to for my next lesson, he would give me 2 exercises to learn. I would have to be able to play them perfectly. He would insist, he would advise me, when you need to learn something word perfect, note perfect, you must be able to play it, recite it 6 times to perfection without a single mistake. Depending on your desire to be as perfect as possible, you'll play it or sing it or recite it 6 times. Now if you get to number 3, you're now at effort number 3, and you make a mistake, you go back to number 1 again, and that's it, you're now back to number 1. If you get to the last beat of 6 times to perfection and you make a mistake, you go back to number 1. You must be able to do it 6 times to perfection. Whatever it is, the song, a poem, a speech, or a piece of music, you need to be able to do it 6 times to perfection. Be ruthless with yourself and you will gain much more. So, I think that my wife has now had a bath, and I'm ready to do the same. It's as hot as hell here today. We were supposed to be having... there was a voice there. Did you hear it? Excuse me?
No, I'm fine.
Why? You're talking to me?
No, I'm editing videos, darling. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much, and God bless. Bye-bye.
I've been video jacked. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks for looking in. Don't forget to like, and if you can comment, that would be great. If not, share. Bye for now.